got appointed, during that time. Ronald Reagan got elected during that time. They put Jimmy Carter out in 11, but they didn't put him, give him a second term. So I know from living that it matters what happens in this moment. It's not a normal time. So I'll stop there. Much more.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm State Representative Leslie Harris. I do represent Denver, Colorado, where my folks are Black people. I represent Colorado, though, because while Black folks are only 4% of the state, we represent 8% of the Colorado General Assembly. And as the chair of the Black Caucus, I always have to give shout out to my caucus members. We serve on every major committee in the General Assembly, most of us as chairs. I currently serve on the Joint Budget Committee, I chair the Appropriations Committee, and I was former vice chair of the Judiciary Committee. In the context of this conversation, I say that with importance because it is important that Black folks show up to vote. In Colorado, in fact, we do. We show up in large numbers, not only in general elections or presidentials, but also in primary elections, which is where Black people get elected into office. So don't sleep on your primaries. If you don't show up in the primaries, Black folks will not likely win those seats in the general election or even in the general election. In the time I've been in the legislature, I've passed over 150 pieces of legislation that have been signed into law. And with the support of the Black Caucus, we've been able to pass police accountability. We have ended the beach tax in Colorado once and for all. We've also included that the diaper tax saving Coloradans at least $40 to $50 a month on their grocery bills. And so when we are in office, we can actually make change. But the best part is when we are in office together, we can really effectuate change. And so what I'm here to talk about too is why it's so important to fight at the local level, at your state level, be involved at the state level, because with everything that's happening coming out of Washington, D.C., if we are not engaged in local politics, we will not be able to make the change that we need to ensure that our communities are safe and protected, but also thriving. So it's an honor to be here with you this morning.
Well, the first thing I did right was the day I started to fight. Keep your eyes on, hold on, hold on, hold on. Keep your eyes on, and hold on, hold on. I always start with a song. That this isn't just about the policy and about strategy, the way that what has always been the power of the movement has been the spirit of the movement. And so I raised it because we have really recognized what time it is. I am very clear that is what is happening in America right now is there's a transition. That those who have been in power have never been challenged in the way at the level, at the extent that they're being challenged, they know this is cussing man's thing. And at the end of the day, they also know that they are always talking about this phantom star. That when I was in college, my astronomy teacher would talk about how that many of the stars that we're looking in the sky no longer exist. They actually burned out years ago. Some of them hundreds of years ago. All we see is the residue. We're actually seeing the residue because of the light years that took in us. What we're seeing in America right now is we're seeing the residue. Right control that is, and ultimately that there is the first time in this country's history where you're going to see the majority of the folks who are people of color. That what you're seeing is what you see in Black presidents and Black vice presidents and Black women on the Supreme Court. That ain't by accident. That's not because they gave us. We made a way, right? Like we've always made a way for us. And so what oppression gets to do is the biggest tragedy of oppression. It makes us, it wants you to believe that you don't have any power. It wants you to believe that you are subject to if it allows you to have power. If it was nothing else, we'll still be slaves. Right? So at the end of the day, we are not, because we stood in our agency and we stood in the spirit of resistance and resilience, and we made change. And I'm raising that because when we're talking about this voting rights fight, we have to really recognize what this is about. And the three things I'll just say quickly around it. The first thing we have to recognize is this issue around abortion and voting rights and attack on the LGBTQ community, all of that is connected. Because this isn't just about a single issue. They want you to think this is about a single issue. Right. This is about the consolidation of white power. people, and Black folks, and Asian folks, and indigenous people, and Latino folks. I saw the largest protest in the history of this country happen, which was multiracial and multi-generational. That is what they're responding to, right? And so I'm raising that because I think we have to recognize, as we're doing this rolling work, this ain't about participation, y'all. We gotta move past the conversation of participation. This is about power. How are we gonna stand and utilize our power for the sake of the environment we design and deserve? But first, we gotta believe we got the power to be able to do that. Yeah.
Always. Right. So I'm Rukia Lumumba. I'm with the People's Advocacy Institute out of Jackson, Mississippi. This is powerful work, which I have literally learned from many of you on this stage. And you know, Latasha talks about power. So what I'm going to mainly focus on is the power of the people. Come on, right? And so moving us away from this understanding that there are people that are elected to office to govern us, and shifting that to a paradigm where we realize that we have to govern ourselves, right? We have to engage in a process of what we call community-led governance, meaning that we have to actually not just go to the voting polls, but we actually have to be a part of the process of developing the policy, of implementing the policy, of ensuring that we're at every table. And that's not something that isn't happening already. We have places where people are actively part of budgets, participatory budgeting, right? Because what I'm saying is that when we do exactly what Latasha's saying and take and realize our power, then we are creating a strategy and a plan that prevents this that is happening now from ever happening again. It is our lack of developing a strategy for power, right, that has placed us in the position that we are in today. And I'm looking forward to going deeper into that more. But I'll say this last thing, is that there's a movie out, just came out called Alice. It's on like Amazon Prime, comedy, Kiki Palmer, our main characters. And it is about the life story of a woman who in the movie is named Alice, but in real life is not named. And she's a woman from Mississippi, right at the border of Mississippi and Louisiana, close to St. James Parish, who was enslaved up until 1965. Her family did not know that slavery had ended. She died in 2014. And when you watch this movie and you read her story a little bit, when you watch it, you know, before watching it, I would say, like, how could somebody not know that slavery had ended in 1965? So I just can't believe it. And when you watch it, you see how you live that. Because we allow our captors, we allow our masters, we allow those people in power to tell us that our reality is one thing, and that everyone around us is experiencing that exact same thing, and we are fearful to our death. We are scared to death to step outside what we know that's in front of us, to see just right across the street something different. Her family was enslaved because they thought everybody else was enslaved too. So they didn't try to run. It wasn't until she was 15 years old that she finally got the gumption. She said, "I'm just not getting beat anymore." I mean, literally beat with whips. She said, "I'm not getting beat anymore," and she just began to run. Run and run and run. And ran straight after miles, ran into a street, a highway. Scared out of her because never seen a car before in her life. Didn't even know roads existed in that way. So we have to, for me, that movie spoke to exactly where we are. We have to move ourselves out of a place of only being comfortable with what we could see in front of us and began to envision, imagine, use our genius to develop and think of something new and different and explore. There are many governing structures across this world where democracy works and it is people-led. And so we have to begin to engage.
I'll start with you right there. About power. So we know that voting is a very important piece of the
power in the Black community. But what strategies, what movement building strategies do we also need to invest in currently voting? So, right, it's not just that. What else do we need to do, especially where there's an all-out attack on our civil rights, like all out? It's not even overt.
I mean, first we have to engage in some serious education, right? A lot of our people don't fully understand or know what's going on, right? Yeah, we hear about the Supreme Court hearing, the Supreme Court decision once it already happened, right? And reproductive justice organizations across the nation did a lot of work, made a lot of effort to try to educate as many people as possible. But we have to do more than just, pushing during a particular period of time. And I think reproductive justice orgs are doing it all year. I think that there are a lot of organizations that are doing work all year round. What we tend to see, and it's only been in recent history, and I'll say about past 5, 6, maybe a little longer years, where people have began to really take on this notion that electoral work is not just during campaign season. It is all year round. Electoral work is really electoral justice work, right? Because we're looking past what we know as voting and looking to how does our engagement, our participation in budgets, how does our participation in policy decisions, how does our participation in actually being a part of institutions change and shift our paradigm of power so that our people can obtain the material control of the resources, to retain the control of our material resources. And so, when we're talking about voting, for me, I'm looking beyond just voting. I'm looking at electoral justice, and that includes everything, right? That includes housing. We're talking about housing on the last day. That includes absolutely taxes. That also includes, equal pay. That includes all of the things. Because when we really stop and think, as Black people in this country, yes, we vote for people. But if we really dig deeper, we're voting for people who we believe will implement policies to help us. And so when we have more input into those policies, then we will see some significant change. And that can't happen just during one campaign, it has to be year round. That means that we have to be engaging in assemblies year round. We have to be calling people together, engaging in caucuses year round, where we are laying out our strategy and moving towards that strategy.
Thank you. And we're going to stay on the voting, the power of it. And I guess I want to hear from the voices. Latasha, you're organizing all over the country, but in Texas and Georgia specifically, we have these restrictive these restrictive voting laws. What are Black women saying about that, about their power and how it's being restricted? What are you hearing from, especially young Black? What are they saying?
People are, and I always talk about this, I actually believe that Black voters are the most sophisticated voters. We have even when people say, if you talk to folks, even those that say they don't want to vote, the reason they're saying that's valid. We need to stop acting like they're crazy. Yeah. Okay. At the end of the day, there are times that I'm like, I don't want to vote either. Right? And the reason is because I felt that I've been betrayed before. Right. I felt that I put people in office before. And so I think when we hear that, instead of us dismissing it, we have to be honest and lean into them around validating what their frustrations are, but also helping them to understand this isn't about a popularity contest, what we like you, right? This is about, at the end of the day, somebody's going to be in a position that's going to make decisions about our community. And ultimately, when I have to do nothing else, I've got to pick the candidate to reduce my harm, right? And we also have to recognize, we can't be saying, well, the Democrats don't do this, the Republicans. Let's be honest, it ain't no Republican Party. There's a white nationalist supremacist party that exists. They have to be stopped at all costs. But there ain't nothing to be said about that. We have to stop making these wrong policies. Does that mean that the Democrats have done us down? Absolutely. We fight them. The one thing about racism is not partisan. Right? That's what we know for sure. And so in that space, though, but we have to really be able to speak to what people are feeling, the frustration they're feeling, but also be able to tell them that what happens, part of the voter suppression wouldn't happen if what our engagement was not making a difference. And so people understand that. So as I'm talking to young people, as we're talking to folks, the bottom line is back over time is, right? We're sophisticated, but we've had to keep our linking in America. We've had to navigate to be able to get our things taken care of. We know the white world and we know our world, right? And we know what times they intersect, and we also know we're sophisticated enough because that's the part of our survival strategy. And so I think that part of the three things I'll just say quickly that I think as we're talking to young people, I mean, one thing is you got to cultivate the leadership and the voices of young Black women, right? You've got to lift up. I know this is right here. Melvin Kim, I was in my early 20s. I was doing voter registration, but I was isolated. I was doing it in my local community. It was Melanie through Black Youth Vote. She started Black Youth Vote. That's the first time that I had actually been introduced to other peers around the nation, that I actually had a larger context to realize that I'm in a rural Alabama community, right? That I can be connected to something different. That would make a difference. I'll shout out the sisters in the back. You see that hot peak back there. That's what I found about Southern Black girls and women's consortium. The idea is that we believe that if we invest in Black girls, right, that we're gonna change the world, just as Black girls. Right? So I think the second piece connected to that is one, I think investing in Black girls, Black women in this process. Secondly, we gotta give grace and space. Oftentimes we are so critical of folks that are going through or people who don't engage. But when we talk to folks, I have been out on doing voter registration drives where someone would say, I have a felony conviction and people won't past it. How dare you? We trying to say, but you don't matter because you can't vote. We talk to children. Children can't vote, right? Because ultimately, who we're appealing to is the humanity of folks. And really be able to engage the difference. Whether you care about me as a number, if I'm just a jelly bean in your number chart, or do you care about me as a person? And so part of that, I also think we have to give grace and space to be able to listen to each other, to be able to sit and hear the frustration when people say they don't want to vote, and then really give them a legitimate reason why they need to consider that different. And then the third and the last thing that I'll say with that is we got to put some money on the ground. At the end of the day, we have to put some money on the ground. And I think most of us that are up here, part of the largest part of what we do with Black Voters Matter, on the other hand, Black Voters Matter, what we've been able to do is invest over $10 million in 800 Black-led grassroots groups. Many of those groups could not get resources otherwise. So I think one of the big things that we have to do are what I'm hearing from the working class.
Excellent, thank you. So Leslie, we want you to, for us, connect the battles at the local level and the state level to the national level democracy conversation. Connect that for us.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, this panel is pretty amazing, so I'm like starstruck a little bit up here, to be honest. But I think that everything that was said is actually what's happening, right? So when they take away our right to vote, we lose resources in our communities. I got on the joint budget committee. There's only 6 of us that serve on the joint budget committee in the House and the Senate. I am the only Black woman to serve since the 90s on that committee. We pass a $36 billion balanced budget every single year, and rarely any of those resources actually come into our community. So when COVID hit, I moved from the Judiciary Committee to the budget committees because I knew that that's where the power was. I knew that if our communities were going to survive and thrive through COVID, that we actually need to make sure that the resources came to us, right? Because no matter your party, there is a systemic effort to keep those resources from coming into our community. And when you can barely make any, when you don't know where you're going to eat next, I'm going to tell you, voting is the last thing on your mind, right? And if we engage in the political process daily and all throughout the year, it's something that you do not do. And that's by design. So when you run for local and state level, what they don't tell you is you don't get paid very much. You barely have any staff, and you're expected to put the weight of everyone on your shoulders because sometimes you're serving as the only one. So I just want to tell a story about how I got involved in politics. I went to CU Boulder, and no, there are not Black people at CU Boulder. And I didn't know that. And so because there were Black people in the brochure. And so I went there and I looked around. I was like, where the heck are the Black folks? And I was walking to, sadly, I probably find it in school, when someone tapped me on my shoulder back then and said, oh, we hang out over here in the UMC, come chill for lunch. And I thank God he did. And I And there were a ton of Black students, lions. It kind of looked like I was in another world or a different world. I don't know what that is, you know. I'd be dating myself, but I was like, that's cool. The Umati Metro table was there, the Muslim students were there, the first generation, the queer students. And I was like, oh, there's actually a lot of us. But when we go back into the community, we're so dispersed that we don't see each other. And I actually was a cheerleader, and I left the cheerleading squad and said, what happens if we actually ran for office? What happens if we take over the student government here? I didn't know at the time that we had the largest student government in the nation, and we ran, and every single one of us won. Every single one of us won. When I graduated, I was the president, and I ran a $36 million budget. And as you think about intersectionality, we were the first. I know it's $1 million budget at 20. Now it's a billion. But then it's a billion. And no, it's true. I had no idea, right? And so those resources that we were able to reallocate and change the makeup of the number of Black students and students of color at CU, because we're able to reallocate the resources to not only recruitment, but also retention and ensuring that folks who are in these positions were paid, right? So that we didn't have to work 3 jobs while also being student leaders. So when I graduated, I took that into Colorado, and we actually started working with the money people of the state. They called them the 4 horsemen. And there were these white men who came to Colorado to turn it blue. But all they cared about was investing in other white resources. And so we said, no, we're gonna also invest in the young folks. We're gonna create an organization that's gonna be led by people of color, young folks of color. And we're gonna make sure that the ballot box is open to everyone. So we got to work. So we passed same-day voter registration, online voter registration, and mail ballot, because we knew from being a red state to a purple state to a blue state. And I stayed engaged the entire time. So after college, I went and I was an intern. And then I started working at the Capitol. The other Black woman in the Capitol at the time, because there was only one, came up to me and asked me who I was and asked me if I would work for her. She was State Representative Rosemary Marshall. I started working as her aide and intern. And because she was there, I was able to see myself in those people. As a Black queer woman, there was no other queer folks in office. There was other Black queer people in office. I thought I had to change who I was in order to win. And that's not true. Because when we build coalitions, we're able to make power, right? We're able to change the whole dynamic. And so I got elected and with the highest vote count in power history. And then I brought my friends. Right? One vote is higher than the majority of every single committee, every step of the way, to make sure you're not changing more communities. And so that's what we did. And then I remember, real quick, thinking about my life experience and the parts of myself that I was not talking about in order to stay in office. And one of those parts is the fact that my sister was incarcerated. She had been incarcerated for 30 years, off and on, and she's now out, but it started with drug addiction that really started from sexual trauma that no one addressed, not even folks in my family, right? And then she was in and out of the system. And so now as an elected official, I talk to my sister a lot. Thankfully, she's clean, she's sober, she's working. But the number one thing one of the things that I think about when we talk about what power looks like and how we connect local to state level is what do Black folks actually need to survive and thrive? That's right. It's not only just access to the ballot, that's right. It's not only criminal justice reform, but yes, that's true. My sister would never be in there. We had criminal justice reform. But the number one thing that made her every single time turn back to the street and turn back to, illegal activities, we will say, was despair and mental health, depression. But number one was being able to take care of her kids. She couldn't take care of her kids without a job. When our communities aren't thriving, this is what happens, right? She couldn't take care of her family without housing. And as we think about the insane cost of housing right now that's happening in all of our communities, we have to also focus on housing. And so when we think about all of these issues, right, when we think about how we're all connected in intersectionality, we have to make sure that we talk about voting. It's about more than just voting. It's voting for what, right? Voting for who. And by the way, it should be you and you. Don't put your future someone else's hands, like run for office yourself too. It's true that issues that are beyond just Black, quote unquote, Black issues, because those are issues that actually keep us down. And if we want to change white supremacy and the barriers that keep us from achieving, we've got to pull out those bricks of injustice one by one by one. And it's gonna take a lot of us, but I tell you, we make progress when we do it together.
Melanie, I'm gonna turn a little bit because you rightly said that Black women carry one of the most intersectional identities and understand in a very real way what's happening here in America today. So tell us, what are our priorities right now as Black women, where we sit today in this climate right now, 2022 today? What are our priorities?
I think first we gotta love up on each other.
Come on,
Right? And back on people,
that's right, come on.
right? And it was there before we got here, and the battle will be there now. So first shot. Right? That's love up on each other. Right? And in this time, we really, if we ever need to love up on each other, it's now. Because what's happening is that, yes, that element of white supremacy and hate and all of the proud word, all of that stuff, right? But it's also affecting us in our community. And so what you also have is they're setting us up. I know that's not the question, I just gotta say it. You know, when the Supreme Court the other day said you can walk around in Times Square, open carry. They set this up.
That's right, that's right,
Because when you feel no hope,
that's right.
you turn on each other. And so we're in that moment where it's an element I feel of an annihilation attempt, like a genocidal attempt to take us out, because you can't maintain white power without figuring out how to make less of us, black and brown, and others to do that. And so we said, well, why are they so mean? I don't know if it was Latasha said, they have an agenda. Maybe it was me that before the remarks like, that, you know, the movement we ain't going down. That's when you know you're right. Because we have to be. They are seriously looking at this thing and give it, right? How they keep the power, right? And they know what's right and wrong. But when you decide you'll sell your soul for power, it don't matter how it happens. So you got wolves on the Supreme Court, and when I saw my sister walk through that door, I had to stop and pray. Sister Katanja, now Associate Justice, say it with me. Katanja Brown Jackson, say it with me. Katanja Brown Jackson. After she put her hand on the Bible and she walked through that door, I said, oh my God, she's gonna get to the belly of the beast. Come on. And so we gotta pray up on that sister to be up in there. Lock her up. Be organized. Faith will get us through anything. Come on, man. We need to. Come on. Faith will get us through anything. Come on. Come on. And if we don't come together, y'all, it seems so. It's hard for me to even believe that we can end up in a 21st century apartheid state. But David, that's what it is. When you folks, they didn't got the other time up there, talking to a grandson up there, the city will be the weight. He's gonna reverse the love decision, right? He's gonna keep it like that. He don't want nobody to worry about that. But he hates himself. That's what I'm talking about. He don't love himself. Or he couldn't sit there and do what he's doing. But when he sit there, man, he allowed himself to be lost out. And you're from Georgia. Come on, brother. You got to become affirmative action. And then you tell affirmative action, you have to go back there. So we got to overcome it's always been there. But these white boys, and now, like I say, I have white friends. I'm gonna get myself in trouble. I'm because I feel in trouble. But these, some elements in the white community will do anything. And as much as we think, and somebody else says, "Shoot, we gotta take up arms." I ain't got a problem with it. I don't think we gotta have money on arms to do where they going.
Yeah.
So we gotta figure this thing out. And our young people, y'all got this thing. Y'all got this thing. Don't let nobody tell you you don't have the power. You got the power. Don't get that bamboozled with the BS that's going on right now towards you all. Because April, back, I get mad about it, you know, and then I love invite at the same time because that's what we're supposed to do. They don't know the matter. What they got going on right now when it comes to this election cycle, they are trying to get, I get to a number. Every young person I asked a question about what happened last week, they say Biden's fault. No. We get to decide who sits on that Congress, and we can change the rules of everything that we went to jail for. And I asked us what to jail for. We can shift that now. Y'all have the numbers more than my generation. But that is what they're talking to you all to say. Focus the power dynamic. You have to know, okay, in the moment you're in, what is the power all about? It is not about 1,600 Pennsylvania. It's not about Biden Harris right now. We can set that over there. They run again in 2024. We in 2022. It is about the House. It is about what normally happens is that power shifts from one, and I'm just being analyst right now. I'm just going to add that to my system. Okay. But I'm just talking about political analyst right now. The reality is the House, right? That normally power shifts anyway, depending on who's in the White House. So we got to change the dynamic as a people who believe in inclusion and fairness and opportunity to maintain that power. That's right. Go against what traditionally happens. And then that U.S. Senate who sit with 100 of them, not one black woman sits up there. Is it 2 black people? One man. That 100 people, those 100 people, something has to keep power, make sure that what needs to be done allows for that power to shift with those 2 people on there, those who are following this, who won't vote for the agenda that they got elected on. Manage it instead of them. That's right. That they don't matter. Because guess what? If they can change that number, and this is split down analysis, can stay in power and get a few more, they'll actually set it themselves. Then we can change the rules and we'll get our vote, we'll get federal voting rights, we'll get the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed, we will get we'll get freedom vote, anything. These 5 months or less that we have here. And we need our young people to own it, y'all. Talk to your peers. I can talk till I'm blue in the face. That's right. And my niece not gonna listen to me for real. You just old, you know. That was me. Jeremiah told me sometimes, he said, y'all old. I said, you don't know how to do this. You know, I do it for you. So that's okay. I will find y'all have to take it on and hit these streets and talk to your peers and shake them and say, we're not going to get fooled by what we see on our phone. That's right. Because they're attacking you to tell you you have no power. That's right. And you have all of it. The rest of us got your back. But we need y'all to lead in a moment they don't expect for you to lead. In that moment is that.
Unintentionally, it's about power, right? So, yeah, I want you to talk about it a lot more time. I have so many more questions, but I want you to talk about the work that you're doing going to organize Black youth and their power? Because you just said it, like, you know, we can talk to them in the face, but how do we organize to make sure they know that they do have power, and how do we organize?
You know, it's a good question, and I wish a young person was up here to really, you know, tell us what's needed. So I would maybe like us to stand up and say.
Oh, you have a panel? We got a panel.
Oh, we got,
That's
that's
just a stage.
okay. So, you know, the work that we do, so the People's Advocacy Institute, I'm also the co-director of the Electoral Justice Project of the Movement for Black Lives. And that's an entity of over 150 different organizations that make up an ecosystem that uses various different methods to engage our people in ways to help build power. It's literally about power. And so whether that's through mass engagement, which is looking at all of the ways that we impact media and media impacts our people, or whether it's electoral justice, where we sit on our table to work with our folks around various different issues and how we either actually take office and maintain office, flank people who are in office, because flanking people who are in office is just as important. Supporting people when they get into office. We can't just elect them and then leave them hanging. We actually have to stand with them and engage in the process of co-governance. And so when I'm talking about co-governance, I mean that's sitting next to them and making those hard decisions as a collective, right? That's making those big decisions, small decisions, and standing by them when they make decisions that the rest of the state or the rest of the country has a problem with. You've got to be with them, because if you know it's the right thing. As long as we, the people, know it's right? Then we got to stick by it. You know, I give an example. So I'm in Mississippi. We've been having open carry in Mississippi. Open carry in Mississippi has existed since forever, right? Right now, let's just say. And my brother is the mayor, Chokwe Anton. I ran his campaign. And he, at one point, you know, when we had an upsurge of violence after COVID, 2020 COVID, you know, he called for the open carry law to be suspended temporarily for over the weekend at least. It was going to be suspended for a lot longer, but he got so much flack. The state filed a lawsuit against him, and our own communities wouldn't stand up strong enough, right? Come out strong enough to say, no, we support this. We see that it's important. They use Jackson always as a space to sell firearms, has the largest gun show in the state, in Jackson, which is the capital city, and then wonder why we also have the highest rate of gun violence. And so sometimes, even when it doesn't feel good, when it's uncomfortable, we got to flank those that we elect. We have to support those that we elect, right? So that's that process of co-governance, is getting into it together. But you know, so that includes our young people, right? We also hold people's assemblies. Assemblies are spaces where community members come together in mass to make big and small decisions, to talk about big and small issues, to set priorities, but most importantly, it's about developing those solutions. The assembly is also a space where it doesn't matter if you can vote. It doesn't matter if you have a criminal history. It doesn't matter your age. It matters that you care about the place that you're in and that you want to be a part of the process of making change. So it is a perfect space for young people. We just had our youth assembly. It was beautiful, amazing. Young people organized it, young people facilitated it, and young people came out with the solutions that are necessary to move us forward for priorities for this year. And so those things should happen year round, not just one time, but year round. That's the process of how we begin to literally build the capacity of our communities to engage in a process that feels foreign, that feels like we have to, that feels like what you said, that we have to come somewhere instead of the governing process coming to us. We have to make it easy. It is processes like what Black Women's Roundtable is doing, what Black Lives Matter is doing, the work that you were doing when you were organizing in school. It's that work that actually we're coming to our community. communities. It's that we're becoming assemblies. We have assemblies in communities as well. You know, it's about coming to our people and maybe being a part of the governing process like brushing your teeth. It's easy. It's something that you don't have to do anything extra. It's something that's already a part of the daily activity. And that's what I'm talking about.
So we are literally out of time, but I just want to have closing comments from each of you. And I stole Sophia's question from the last panel because I had something else to purpose better. What gives you hope to continue the work we do? You can answer that or answer something else. But just your closing comments. Thank you.
You know, what gives me hope? Black people. Like, as long as we here, as long as we breathe, and we got spirit, we got agency, we have the ability to shift things. And we've always, Black people in particular, have always been on the front line. So what gives me hope is that as long as I see a sister in the room, as long as I see some Black women, like when I'm feeling bad or my hair ain't good, or I had a bad day, all I got to do, it never fail, is get on the elevator with a sister. I don't need like the elevator.
For me, what gives me hope, of course, is young people. But I'll also say through COVID and through everything we've been going through, it's community. It's community. And the fact that we can build community together is so very important. So when we talk about what politics used to look like, especially in the Black community, I'll be honest, it was like there could be one. There can only be one. There can't be multiple, and they're probably, you know, and then we don't support them. And that's not how it has to be anymore. And so if you get yourself in a situation where you're in leadership, whether it's elected or at your place of work or in your church or wherever, and you have the craft and barrel mentality, check yourself, right? Because it's so important that we come to the spaces together. Because if we don't, we will not have the power to change. And I will tell you, every time I'm on a white panel, I tell them, I'm not gonna be your only Black or queer person. If you want me on this panel, you have to have a diverse panel or I'm not coming. Period. I can be other places, you know? And so we all have to do that when we feel like it's safe for us to do that. Because people need to know that one, we're not a monolith, our community is strong, and that our diverse voices within our community deserve representation and deserve a voice.
All right, ma'am, you close this out. Come on.
Well, I just said enough said, yeah, what y'all think? I think enough has been said. It's our moment in the midst of it all, it's still our moment. And if we weren't moving things in the right direction, those who don't believe in this world is for everybody, will be going after us. And so when they're trying to go after us, every angle, God still is on the throne, right? And I believe if we use our faith, whatever that may be to you, and use our strength and power as one, then we will be all right. And it's all about what you do with the dash. Because we all have a beginning and an end, right? And the infinity of it is whatever is happening is happening. So we're in this moment, and I know we're gonna be all right. That's all I want to say, and just say thank you again last time, right? And to let you know to stay tuned for those who are watching out there. To stay tuned. We got more to say. We got more young people. We got Susan Howard and Clark Atlanta, and some rapid growth young people and our state leaders and some of our national partners. We're going to keep this conversation going. So if you're out there watching, just stay tuned. We're gonna eat a little bit, you know, y'all take a lunch break, right? And then we're gonna come back to talk about what we need to do and go a little deeper about what's happening in the States. So stay tuned, and thank you our time again for partnering and Mississippi Black Women's Roundtable for us coming together.
We're down to our phenomenal